up guys, welcome to my Wilt Shadow Shot Yoga build guide. Now I know there's a lot of guides on this build already. You could probably type in Wilt Yoga into YouTube and find 15-20 guides, but I asked you guys if you wanted to see a guide on this build, and the majority of you said yes, so here it is. Okay, so this is probably one of the most versatile builds in the game. It has really high mobility, fairly good defenses, extremely high damage, extremely high single target, and it has explosions. It can clear all content, and it can also clear Path of the Brave 5 in about 2 or 3 minutes. So the character we're going to use is going to be a space-time elapse yoga, and these are the hero traits we're going to take. There's not really a whole lot of explanation here, just copy what I'm doing. This is just the best setup. As for the talents, we're gonna go with Goddess of Darkness first, and I'm just gonna scroll through as usual so you can copy it. There's not really a whole lot of variety here. You kind of just want to take it exactly as I'm taking here. And by the way, once you're at around level 94-ish, you want to come back to this tree and actually get these 4 nodes. You don't typically take this early on because there's just better options, but this is actually pretty good for damage as well. Moving on to the keystones, we have Plague as our first one. These other 2 are kind of bad, so we're just going to go with Plague. It's probably the best one for just damage over time. And then for this one, you're either going with Subtle Impact or Forbidden Power, depending on which one you have on your Infinity. You want typically either of these 2 on your Infinity, on your belt. I have Subtle Impact on my belt, so I just went with Forbidden Power. The next tree is going to be Soulbender. So here's the tree. I didn't take this node because I did not notice any of my skills actually leveling up from this. I don't know if that's a bug or if I'm blind. A lot of people take this. I don't know if this actually does anything for us, but you can try. If it works for you, then take it. I didn't take it personally. Besides that, this is pretty standard stuff. Okay, so the first keystone on this tree is going to be Stealth Stab. Both of these other ones are bad, so just go with Stealth Stab. And then here we're going Twisted Belief. This is really good because we're actually scaling really well with Erosion skill level, and we don't do any elemental damage, so that's the best one here. Our next tree is going to be Psychic, and I'm just going to scroll through so you can copy. This is also very standard. There's not really a whole lot else you can do here. And as for the keystones, we're taking Affliction. It's the best one. And then as far as the other keystone, I'm taking Verbal Abuse. Now, if you don't have the boost that I have, which I'll get into later on, you would want to go with more with less, but I have a pair of boosts that actually gives me this keystone, so I'm going with Verbal Abuse. Now moving on to our skills, we are using Shadow Shot as our main active skill. These are the best support skills, so just copy this. This will be the most amount of damage for you. Efficient cast is really important for maintaining your mana. Now, Mana Boil is one of those things that you can switch off if you cannot maintain it. This will burn 5% of your mana per second, so if you don't have enough mana regen, don't use this. It's more important to just have as many will stacks up by being able to spam your Shadow Swamp and Shadow Shot. So if you can't use this, you can maintain this. You can go with Delayed Pain for a defensive option, or Secret Origin Unleash for an offensive option. Or you can also go with Aim for another offensive option. But this kind of hinders your movement, so I don't necessarily recommend this. As for a movement ability, we're using Spiral Strike with Hardened and Quick Mobility. This is just the best setup. This is an extra layer of defense for you, and then Quick Mobility just makes you get around faster essentially. If you have an extra energy slot, you can add Periodic Burst for some extra attack and cast speed. It's pretty useful. As for our other damaging ability, you actually just want to use Shadow Swamp with these support skills. Shadow Swamp is really important. You actually want to be spamming this the entire time to kind of refresh the there's like an internal cooldown on how often this can inflict wilt. So by spamming it, you're actually constantly inflicting wilt with this. And since we are a energy shield build, we are using Force Start to kind of help with regen. We also have a lot of regen from our gear, so you can swap this out if you want for maybe delayed pain if you don't really feel like you need it, but I feel like it's pretty useful. And this is what I'm using: extended duration, cooldown, and iron fortification for some extra armor. Now moving on to our auras, this is the first setup. This is gonna be sealing our life, so you can't really see it, but I think I'm at like 88% sealed life. Now you have to make sure that you get precise seal conversion. This is really important because this will allow you to seal as much as I'm sealing. If I just use the regular seal conversion, I could not seal all four of these other things here. Moving on to our second aura setup, I'm using Magical Source, Energy Fortress, Deep Pain, Stat Fast with Restrain. You want to make sure that you get Restrain with both of these setups. Maybe you don't necessarily need it for this one. I might be, actually I do need it, never mind. Yeah, I just wanted to see. Yeah, you do need it for both setups. This is also like pretty cheap though. You can probably get this for like 5 FE. It just takes a while to level it up. The only thing that you can really change here is Stat Fast. You don't necessarily need to use this, but I'm using it because this gives me like an extra like 5% physical damage reduction, so it just kind of helps with tanking Keegan and all that kind of stuff. As for our curse setup, we're using Entangled Pain and Corruption on the curse on hit, supported with Abyssal Hatred. This is pretty standard for erosion damage builds. This is just the most damage. Now moving on to our items. Our helmet, we're going to be using a crafted helmet on a Long Night Sorcerer's Mask base. Now this base on an item level 85 is about 100-ish, 90 to 100, so it's pretty expensive, but it's worth it because you get an extra skill level. And this is pretty much the stats that you want on it. Now with all of these, by the way, you can tinker with the resists. I think resists are going to be kind of different for everybody, so you don't necessarily have to copy the resists, but everything else kind of needs to stay the same. Now support skill level is actually not the best thing that you can get. The best thing is actually added maximum energy shield. It's an ominous craft, but I wasted too much FE on this and I didn't feel like trying to get that mod on this item, so I just settled with +2. And the other expensive craft is the aura effect, which is a restless craft, so this item is actually really expensive to craft. Now moving on to our chest piece, we're using Twilight Vestment. This is just really good because it smooths out your regen with this mod. If you have this elevated, this will pretty much mean that you're always regening energy shield. The build will just feel a lot better, but it's also kind of expensive to get that craft, so I just went with more LE res and reaping duration. You could pretty much get any of these elevated besides maybe the shield charge speed, and it'll be really good for you. So this is a really versatile piece. You don't really need to target anything specific, but if you want raw damage, you want persistent skill level and reaping duration. That's the most raw damage. Now moving on to our necklace, we're using Manella's Mist, and this is just a really good all-round wilt erosion damage necklace. Make sure that you get this elevated mod. This is not that expensive. I think this cost me about maybe like 60 like a week ago, so it's probably like 90 by now, but yeah, it's not too bad. Make sure you get something that looks pretty much exactly like this. For our gloves, we are using a crafted pair of gloves with the energy shield regain base. This is really important because this will also help with your regen. I think this base is kind of expensive at item level 85. I think I bought it for like 40 a week ago, so I don't really know how expensive it is. It's probably not a whole lot more, but yeah, this is exactly pretty much what you want on your gloves. Getting this reap mod is fairly important for damage. I didn't get to land the tier 1, unfortunately. I was wasting too much FE on this mod, so I just settled for tier 2, but obviously it's pretty standard stuff. It's just a stat stick. Essentially you're just trying to get your resists and your energy shield from this item. For your infinity, you're actually looking at something that looks like this. Now I actually don't have this corroded for some reason. I guess I forgot to corrode this, but You want something that has erosion resist, obviously, or just regular all resist. Affliction effect is useful, reap is pretty much mandatory, and then you're either taking subtle impact or forbidden power, depending on which one you have on your belt. Now, there's also a budget option. This is one that I used for a while. You can actually use something like this. This is pretty good as well. I had acquaintance on this. This is not necessarily that good, but it will just help you get more stacks of wilt, so it does help with stacking wilt, but the other two options are a lot more damage. But this is kind of your budget-ish option, because not a lot of people are going with acquaintance. This is not a very sought after mod. So we're using King's Boon for our boots. It gives you a reap, it gives you a keystone for 40% extra dot, gives you resists, fairly useful overall. You're looking for the reap elevated mod or the morbidless elevated mod. For your rings, you actually want the Aurora ring base for the energy shield, because we don't have a whole lot of energy shield with this character, and this is fairly accurate to, you know, what you want on this item. I actually bought this, which is why it's all T2 mods pretty much. I bought this like this for 100, but just the base at item level 85 plus I think is like 200 FE, so this is a very expensive item. A budget option would be Abyssal Ring. I have an implicit corroded on here, but this actually has erosion damage baseline, so you could go with this for more of a, you know, offensive option. But best in slot is the Aurora Ring, and you kind of want to just mix and match these mods that I have on both of these. Obviously get whatever resists you want or you need. Reaping duration is useful, and then ailment damage is pretty useful. Energy shield regain if you're struggling with regeneration and stuff. I think reaping duration is actually a restless mod, so it could be fairly expensive to get this. Sorry, my bad. The elemental resists is the one that is a restless mod, so it could be fairly expensive to get the all Ellie res, but this is a very important mod to get, at least on one of your rings, because it will kind of make sure that you're on an equal footing with all of your resists in the game. Now for weapons, we're using a memory and a crafted. Offhand, you know, some people say using 2 memories is better than 1. For my version of the build, using 2 memories is actually significantly worse. It's about 20% of a damage loss. Now, I'm sure if I had the best memory in the game that had, you know, the added base wilt damage and like the cast speed elevated or some shit, maybe it would be best if I used 2 memories, if I had, you know, both weapons like that, but that's very expensive and I just did not have the money to try that. So as of right now, I'm using a memory and, you know, main hand for the explosions and just the insane amounts of wilt damage that it adds. Now, if you can't afford a memory, you can actually go with the repeated end weapon, which is a one-handed sword that also adds explosions to your build and wilt damage and other stuff like that. It's a lot cheaper than a memory. I was actually using it for a while, but the memory is obviously your best in slot for your main hand. Now, as for your offhand, you are actually using a gilt short blade. Now, this is very, very difficult to craft. This is a long craft. This took me an hour and a half to craft this item because of how much or how long it takes just to click through all the mods. And also I landed a double corrosion on this, so this is probably worth like 3,000 or 4,000 FE. And there's actually a guide on Discord that I'll link in the description that details how to craft this. I'm not gonna go too much into this right now because it just takes too long, but yeah, there's a guide in Discord. I'll link it so you guys can see if you want to craft this for yourself. Now for your Pact spirits, you just want to go with anything that has like affliction, dot, all this type of stuff on it. And then I also made sure that I grabbed the mana regen nodes and the Elirez nodes here because I'm actually struggling with both of those right now. But this fixes, you know, my Elirez and my mana regen, so I don't need to take a lot of what this guy has to offer me. But yeah, just be on the lookout for affliction and dot based bets. Alright, so that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, let me know. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.